The deal was her idea. The feelings were mine. And the first rule she wrote was, nothing real. 6 weeks later, I would sit in a library at a Connecticut estate and hear her tell her sister she was afraid of losing me. But on that Thursday afternoon, she walked into my office, closed the door, and said, "I need you to be my boyfriend." She said it the way she presented quarterly projections. That's how I knew she'd been rehearsing it. My name is Marcus Reid. I'm 34 years old, and I had been competing with Claire Ashford for the same VP position for exactly 18 months. Not Meridian Capital. 40 people. 3 floors of glass near the harbor. The kind of firm where everyone knows your billing rate, your lunch order, and who you're likely to become before you've decided yourself. I'd been there 6 years. Claire came in the 7th. She arrived in September, wore linen blazers the following August with the confidence of someone who had personally settled an old dispute with the coastal humidity, and within months had made the kind of changes that didn't announce themselves, but that everyone was using by the end of the quarter. I respected her the way you respect a chess player who keeps winning matches you needed to win. Not because you want to lose, but because the game is better when they're across the table. 1 VP position, end of quarter, 2 candidates. Neither of us had mentioned it to the other. The Thursday she came into my office, I was reviewing a term sheet that had been revised 7 times and was measurably worse for each one. She knocked once, came in before I answered. A Claire Ashford move. She sat down across from me, hands flat on her thighs. The posture she used when she'd already decided something and was presenting, not discussing. "Eleanor Harrington," she said. I put down the term sheet. Eleanor was 72, 3rd-generation family wealth, managed a charitable trust north of $200 million. She'd been considering Meridian for months. She was also the client that would move Claire's candidacy from strong to decisive. Her assistant mentioned to my assistant that I was seeing someone from the office, Claire said. "Were you?" "I was theoretically available to be seeing someone." "That's a careful answer." The point is, Eleanor now expects to meet him at the Meridian Gala in 2 weeks. She told her assistant she prefers to work with people who have, I'm quoting, clarity about what they're building. I looked at her. "You want me to be your boyfriend. A limited engagement, defined parameters. Those are the words people use for a boyfriend." She pulled my notepad toward her, picked up my pen, wrote 6 lines, turned it to face me. 3 rules, numbered, each one underlined. Rule 1, no one at the firm knows. Rule 2, nothing real. Rule 3, ends when Eleanor signs the commitment letter. I read it twice. I thought about the 18 months, the term sheet, the math I'd already done on the VP position. I thought about 17 reasons to say I need to think about this. "Okay," I said. She looked at me. "That quickly? You made a compelling case." She studied me for a moment, the 4 to 5 seconds she used before saying what she'd already planned to say. "What happens if one of us forgets it's fake?" It was the right question. I should have taken longer with it. "We won't," I said. She tore the page from the notepad, handed it across the desk. I folded it in thirds, slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. She stood up, straightened her blazer, and left. I did not take the memo out that day, or the next, or the one after that. The Meridian Gala was at a waterfront hotel, the kind of event where the canapes were architectural and the conversations were fractionally more honest than the ones held in conference rooms, because the wine was better and the lighting gave everyone somewhere to look, other than directly at each other. Claire wore navy. She hadn't told me. I noticed it the way you notice something you've been trying not to track. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Each detail arriving separately before assembling into something I chose not to name. Eleanor Harrington arrived at 7:15 with sparkling water, her lawyer, and the posture of someone who had been in rooms like this one since before the hotel existed. She watched us for 11 minutes before she came over. I know because I was counting. She shook my hand. "Read me the way people read information rather than receive an introduction," said, "You work with her. Same department. And yet?" A brief smile. "How is that?" "Mostly fine," I said. "Occasionally complicated. something shifted in her expression. The satisfaction of a question framed as small talk that had just received an honest answer by accident. Beside me, Claire was still, and then her hand found my arm just below the elbow. Light contact, not performed. The kind of touch that wasn't for anyone watching, which was, I thought, the problem, because we were here for people watching. And that wasn't what that was. Eleanor moved on. I looked at Claire. She was already talking to someone else, expression back to its practiced professional setting, as if nothing had happened. I thought, that wasn't in the script. I thought it again twice before the evening ended. The problem with pretending beside someone you already know is that the pretending arrives pre-furnished. You don't have to build the history, it's already there. And over the 2 weeks between the gala and the estate dinner, the performance kept running out of places to perform. There was the Thursday breakfast, where I told the server before she could ask, "No shellfish." I said it the way you say things that have become automatic. No one asked how I knew, including Claire. There was the internal review, where Tom asked me a number I didn't have. Claire said it cleanly, without looking at me. The reflex of someone who has been covering for a person long enough to stop deciding about it each time. She did it in front of the whole room. It saved me 30 seconds of searching. It cost her nothing she'd acknowledge. After the meeting, I caught her in the hallway. "Thank you," I said. "I had the number," she said. "It was faster." She kept walking. I stood in the hallway for a moment longer than necessary. There was the Friday evening when she had a difficult call. I was at my desk at 6:40. I told myself I was finishing something. By 7:15, I admitted I was staying. My coat was on the back of my chair. When she came out and saw me, she didn't ask why I was still there. Neither did I. I said, "Hard call?" She said, "Long one." I said, "Do you want to get dinner?" She said yes before either of us did the math on what that meant. We talked for 2 hours. Not about Eleanor or the deal or anything at the firm. We talked about a difficult year she'd had at 28 that she'd never mentioned in any professional context. I talked about the same year for me. They weren't the same year, but they had the same shape. I walked her to the train. She said, "You're a better listener than I expected." "Than you expected from me specifically? Or generally?" "Specifically." "What did you expect?" She thought about it. "Precision," she said. "Not attention?" She went down the stairs. I walked home. The distinction occupied me for most of the walk. There was the 11:47 p.m. message. Framed as work, not quite work. A line from something she'd read that had nothing to do with any deal we were running. I read it 3 times before I replied. I told myself I was deciding what to say. The more accurate version, I was deciding how honest to be about the fact that I'd noticed she sent it at 11:47 p.m. and what I thought that meant, and whether I was going to say so. I replied at 11:59, something accurate and less honest than what I'd drafted first. She replied at 12:03, warmer than the message warranted. I left it on read for 6 minutes, not because I was busy. The drive to Eleanor's estate was 3 hours. We left at 8. By 9:30, we'd covered everything safe. The deal, the portfolio history, Eleanor's known preferences, and had arrived, without deciding to, at the other kind of conversation. She told me about a bridge in Portugal, not relevant to anything. Just a bridge she'd seen on a detour from a conference once that had stuck with her in ways she'd thought about since without fully explaining. She described it with the same precision she brought to proposals. The structural detail, the specific light, the way a century of use had worn the surface into something that looked more deliberate than its original design. "Why that one?" I asked. "I'm not sure. Something about things that survive being used, I think." She said it looking out the window, meaning, I thought, something beyond the bridge. I told her the real reason I'd moved to Boston. Not the resume version. The version that involved a decision at 29 that had looked wrong from the outside and had been wrong from the inside for entirely different reasons, and had still taken me somewhere better than the right decision would have. She listened without the sounds people make to signal listening. Just listened. Then, You make better decisions when you're not sure you're making one. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Do you make them about everyone? She looked at me briefly. No, she said. I watched the road. You're different in cars, she said after a while. How so? You stop being careful. I thought about that. So do you, I said. I know, she said. Not defensive, not performing, just honest in the way that's available when you stop spending energy on the performance. We drove the rest of the way talking about things that had nothing to do with the deal and everything to do with why we were both on the road. At one point, she said, "What made you say yes that Thursday?" You asked me. People ask each other things all the time. You asked me specifically. That's still not an answer. I thought about it for a moment. You presented it like a business case, I said. Which told me you didn't think I'd just say yes because you asked. You thought you needed to convince me. That was interesting. She looked at me. Interesting? It told me something about how you thought about me. And how's that? Like someone whose yes meant something, and whose no was possible. She was quiet for a moment. Most people say yes to things because they can't think of a reason not to, she said. I know. You said yes in about 4 seconds. Yes. That's fast for someone who apparently needed to be convinced. I looked at the road. I know, I said. She didn't push it. We drove the last 40 minutes, mostly in silence that was the good kind. The kind that doesn't need filling. At one point I looked over and she was asleep against the window. I drove the rest of the way more carefully than usual. I didn't examine why. Eleanor's estate was 200 acres and 3 centuries of quiet. She met us at the entrance, looked at us arriving the way she'd looked at us at the gala. The same reading, the same conclusion. The guest cottage was across the garden, 1 bedroom. A family event was using the main guest rooms that weekend. The cottage was what was available. The estate manager explained this apologetically. It wasn't designed. It was just what was left. We looked at each other in the doorway. We're adults, Claire said. We are, I said. The bed is fine. It's fine, I agreed. Neither of us made it into more than that. Not yet. The dinner that evening was 4 courses, and Eleanor's version of a sustained audit, conducted through good wine and questions that arrived at angles. She asked what we disagreed about most. Claire said, most things initially. Usually one of us is right, and the other catches up. Which one is usually right? Claire looked at me. Actually looked, not performed. Depends on the category, she said. I said, she's being careful. The honest answer is that she's right faster than I admit it. The gap has been shrinking. Eleanor looked at us both. Then she reached inside her folder and set a signed commitment letter on the table. I've seen enough, she said. That was all. After dinner, Eleanor retired to the main house. Claire said she was going to find something to read. The cottage library was long and narrow. 3 walls of accumulated books, a reading chair by the window, a lamp with amber light that made the room feel like a pause between things. I found the book I'd been thinking about on the drive. Sat down. 8 minutes later, I heard her come in. She didn't see me. The chair was angled away from the door. The lamp wasn't visible from the entrance. I heard her take out her phone. I should have said something immediately. Anna, her sister's name. I'm fine. It's late. I just wanted to hear your voice. A pause. Her sister talking. He's fine. We're at the estate. It's... She stopped. When she continued, her voice was lower. Not a whisper. She still thought she was alone. The particular register of someone saying something had been carrying for a while, and finally decided to sit down. The problem with pretending with someone you already know is that you stop being able to remember what you were pretending about. I closed the book. Very slowly. I did not move otherwise. Have you told him? Anna. No. Why not? The pause that followed lasted long enough that I stopped tracking my own breathing. Because if I'm wrong about how he feels, I lose the one person I would call to talk about being wrong. She was quiet for a moment. I know, she said, to something Anna had said. I know, just not yet. She ended the call. I heard her footsteps move toward the door and stop. Marcus. I looked up. She was in the doorway of the library. looking at me. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Then she turned and walked back to the bedroom. I stayed in the chair. I looked at the book I hadn't read. I thought about the deal memo folded in my jacket pocket, and how I had carried it for 6 weeks in a pocket I never used for anything. Then I got up, put the book back, and went to bed. No. At 2 a.m., the room was very quiet. I had not slept. The Connecticut dark had a texture the city didn't. The absence of urban noise, the presence of wind in trees, a quality of silence that made ordinary silence feel thin. I was thinking about the memo in my jacket pocket. I'd checked for it twice on the drive up. The way you check for something you don't want to lose and don't fully acknowledge why. "Marcus." "Yeah." A pause. "You heard all of it." "Yes." Another pause. The kind with weight. "When did you stop pretending?" She said it first. That wasn't what I expected. I thought about the gala, about her hand on my arm, about the 11:47 p.m. message, about a bridge in Portugal, about driving more carefully for the last 40 minutes because she was asleep against the window. "Somewhere on the drive," I said. "Which direction?" "Both," she exhaled. The sound of someone who has been holding a question long enough that receiving the answer is both better and more frightening than the question was. "I didn't call Anna because I was ready to say it," she said. "I called because I was trying to talk myself out of it." "Did it work?" "You were in the library." I looked at the ceiling. "I'm sorry I didn't say something immediately," I said. "When I realized you were there." "Would you have?" "No, probably not." "Me neither." A pause. "This is apparently how we do things. Slowly," I said. "And in the wrong order. Usually." The room was quiet. "Claire." "Yeah. I kept the memo. 6 weeks in my jacket pocket. I don't keep anything in jacket pockets." She was still. "That's not conclusive," she said. "No," I said. "It's something else." "What else?" The part that was true before I decided it was. She was quiet, long enough that I thought I'd said too much. Then, "I told Anna I'd lose the one person I'd call if I was wrong about you." "I heard. I've been looking for the right way to say it for 6 weeks." "I know. There isn't one," she said. "No," I said. "There isn't." A pause. So, I said. She was quiet. Then, carefully, "Are you going to make me say it first?" I turned to look at her. "No," I said. "You're not wrong about me. You haven't been wrong about me." The silence that followed was different from the others. Not waiting. Arrived at. "Interest." The morning was easier than it should have been. She made coffee. I found the mugs. We sat at the table by the window for 20 minutes before anyone mentioned going back. She said, "We need to figure out the firm." "I know. Not today." "Not today," I agreed. She was quiet. "What happens to the VP?" she said. I looked at the table. "I don't know yet." She looked at me for a moment. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a question. More like the beginning of one she wasn't ready to ask. "One thing at a time," I said. She accepted that. Later, on the way to the car, she said, "I meant what I said last night." "I know. Both things." I looked at her. "So did I said. She nodded once. We drove back mostly in silence. The same kind as the last 40 minutes coming up. The kind that doesn't need anything added to it. Toronto. We drove back on Sunday. Monday morning, I went to Tom's office before Claire arrived. I knocked. He waved me in. He had a coffee he was already on his second of and the expression of someone who had already planned to have a difficult conversation with someone else today and was recalibrating. "Marcus," he said. "I have something to tell you," I said. "And I'd rather tell you directly than have you hear it another way." He gestured to the chair. I sat. I told him. All of it. When it started. Why? What it had become. He listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Tom, who normally managed conversations like projects and had opinions about pace. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "And Claire?" he said. I'm telling you first. She doesn't know I'm here." "Why?" I thought about how to say it accurately. "Because I wanted to make a decision that wasn't about us negotiating together. It needed to be mine." Tom looked at me. "What decision?" "I'm removing myself from consideration for the VP position." He was quiet again. "Marcus, I know it's not required, but I helped create the conflict. The candidacy should be clean. And I stopped. And I've realized I don't want the promotion more than I want not to be competing against her. That's the honest version. Tom looked at his coffee, then at me. I'll need to talk to the board, he said. I know. This doesn't have to mean what you're making it mean. I know that too. He looked at me for a long moment. All right, he said. Thank you for coming to me directly. I went back to my desk. The office was starting to fill. Claire arrived at 8:40 with her coffee and her bag and a Tuesday morning expression I had by then a very specific familiarity with. She sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, did not look up. I looked at my screen. I told myself the decision was made. That was partly true. The other part. I sat at my desk all morning aware of exactly where she was in the room, in the way I had been, without examining it, for 18 months. 3 days later, Claire appeared in my doorway. She closed the door. She did not sit down. Tom told me, she said. I set down the pen. When? This morning. What did he tell you exactly? That you disclosed the relationship, and that you withdrew from the VP candidacy. A pause. Without telling me. Yes. Why? I looked at her. Because the decision was mine to make, I said. And I wasn't sure I could make it if you were in the room. That's not the reason. I looked at her. She was right. She was usually right faster than I acknowledged it. No, I said, it's not the whole reason. Then what is... I thought about how to say it honestly. Because I'd already made the decision before I could talk myself into a version of it that was about transparency, or fairness, or anything other than... I stopped. Other than what? Other than the fact that I didn't want the promotion more than I wanted not to be in a competition with you. She looked at me. The professional expression had gone somewhere. She was just looking. That's not... She started. I know it's not a transaction. I'm not telling you because I want something back. I'm telling you because you're standing in my office and you deserve the honest answer instead of the version of it that makes me look measured. She was quiet for a moment. She walked to the window, stood there with her back to me. I didn't tell you I was afraid of losing you, she said. I heard. I was in a library at midnight, working up to a phone call I'd been putting off for a week. I know. And you went and gave up. She stopped, started again. You made a decision that had real consequences before I said anything. Before I was brave enough to say anything. She turned around. I've been in this industry for 8 years, she said. I've been careful about every professional decision I've made. Every relationship, every boundary, every piece of advice I didn't ask for. I've been careful. I know. And you just decided? Without asking me, without giving me the chance to... She stopped. To what? I said. To do the same thing first. I looked at her. I'm sorry, I said, for not telling you. That was mine to make, but it was ours to know. She shook her head. I'm not upset that you didn't tell me. Then what? She looked at me the way she looked at the third take. The one that was truer than the careful one. I'm just aware that you were braver about this than I was. And I've spent 6 weeks telling myself I was being patient, being strategic, waiting for the right moment. She held my gaze. There wasn't going to be a right moment, I was just afraid. I looked at her. You called your sister at 11 p.m. from an estate library, I said. That's not nothing. The corner of her mouth moved. I thought I was alone. I know, the chair was angled away from the door. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she walked to the chair across from my desk. The same chair she'd sat in 6 weeks ago when she handed me 3 rules and a notepad page, and sat down. So, she said. So, what do we do now? I looked at her. I think, I said, we do the thing we've been doing since the gala without the pretending part. She thought about it. That's not a plan, she said. No, I said. But I've noticed you work better without one anyway. She looked at me. That's accurate, I said. She didn't answer, but she stayed in the chair. Tom called us in separately first, then together. He said the board had been discussing senior leadership structure for 2 months before any of this. The mid-market division had grown faster than the original model anticipated. 2 VP positions had been under consideration since September. They had a business case. They had the head count. He slid offer letters across the table. Neither of us picked them up immediately. "For what it's worth," Tom said, "you both disclosed in the same week, independently, before either of you knew the other had." He looked at us both. That mattered to the board. Not because it made a complicated situation simple, and it didn't, but because it told them something about your judgment. He left us in the conference room. We sat across the table from each other. A table we'd sat across from each other at probably 300 times in various combinations of professional formality. This time was different. 2 positions, Claire said. 2 positions, I said. The board was planning this before. Apparently, you didn't have to withdraw. No, I said. But I was going to. The outcome doesn't change that. She held my gaze. I know, she said. The same 2 words she'd said on the drive up when I told her she was different without her armor. Not performing, just honest. She picked up her offer letter. I picked up mine. We read them at the same table, in the particular quiet of 2 people who have stopped spending energy on the gap between what they're doing and what they're pretending to be doing. Hey, that was 8 months ago. I want to say everything resolved cleanly after that. It didn't entirely. There were 2 weeks where the firm was figuring out how to structure the reporting lines, and we had 3 conversations with HR that were professionally necessary and personally tedious. There were colleagues who had opinions. Most of them kept those opinions to themselves, which was all we'd asked. Tom said exactly one thing to me about it, on the day our titles were official. He said, "The work is better when you're both in the room. That's all I care about." He was not wrong. She still wins arguments faster than I admit she's right. The gap has narrowed. She is tracking it in a way I find both annoying and accurate. She still sends messages at 11 p.m. framed as work and not quite work. I've stopped pretending the framing is the point. We moved last month. She brought more books than was sensible. I brought more organizational systems than the space required. We bought additional shelving and agreed it solved both problems. On the 3rd shelf, in a small frame, a torn notepad page. 6 lines. Her handwriting. 3 rules, numbered, underlined. Rule 1 lasted 48 hours. Rule 2 lasted 11 days. Rule 3, Eleanor's signature, came and went while neither of us was tracking the calendar. In the bottom right corner of the page, in pencil, in my handwriting, asterisk always was real, added later, after everything. Because Rule 2 said nothing real, and I wanted the record corrected. She saw it the morning we moved in. She stood in front of the shelf for a moment. Then she looked at me across the room. She didn't say anything. The way she looks when she's already decided. The way she looks when the answer was clear to her before she asked. And she's giving me the time to arrive. The way she looks when the game is better because we're finally on the same side of the table. Have you ever agreed to something so fast that it took you weeks to understand why? And have you ever been trusted by someone, really trusted in the way that costs them something, and realized you'd waited too long to say the thing that was already true? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.